Hey guys, it's simmerrei here with kind of a decor and build ideas video for graveyards. The perfect place for this one I found to be in the Hanford Bagley world is just surrounded by a lot of trees and kind of burial grounds looking objects, so this was just perfect. So we're starting by just bulldozing the lot, and I'm actually building this for myself for my achievement hunter let's play, because I want to obviously keep the graves of all the generations to see how many graves we end up with, and also a place for my ghost collection to live in. So that's just another idea for you if you have some ghosts that you're collecting. I'm starting off by just manipulating the terrain because I want the grave areas to be kind of separated. Like this top area is going to be for pet graves, and the rest can be for specific families or types of sims that you have, for example all grandkids or all sims that are not in your main family but kind of like married into the family, you know, just whatever. Most of the separate grave areas are divided with these tiny little fences, and I'm also using them as the railing for the stairs because it just looks the best. And now I'm building the mausoleum. There are a million different ways you can build a mausoleum. This one is more fancy looking instead of just a straight blocky building, and I'm using fences to give some more dimension to the roofs. And the wall trims, you kind of have to usually add in a second floor and then delete it one by one, otherwise it's gonna disappear, so that you have more dimension and a structure to the build rather than just flat walls. I'm not really sure of what the style is, like, I don't know, Gothic architecture or something like that. I don't know, church architecture. Just a lot of roof manipulation to try to not have any gaps. So it's just copying and adding a bunch of little pieces and then using the, I believe it was a shift and drag, to be able to drag it in smaller increments than what the game usually allows you. And then we are placing a bunch of windows, but mainly on the second floor, just for, again, the architectural part to make it look more fancy. But inside I don't actually want there to be windows because the walls are going to be covered with urns. And now moving on to the inside, I thought I would put a fountain at the very front because usually you see holy water where you can just, you know, put it on your forehead. Also, the inside of this, I'm kind of almost trying to make it more like, if you've ever played like Lara Croft, it kind of looks like almost like a temple. And as I said, I'm building this more for myself, but because I was already building it for my achievement hunter family, I thought I may as well share it, because when I first started playing The Sims 4, I actually made this kind of family mausoleum graveyard just to put the graves all in one place. But here I'm just using a bunch of shelves and also those, what are those big rocks on the floor. Depending on the object size and also the shelf height, you may not be able to place it, so regardless you're gonna have to free place it with like the move up and down 9 and 0 buttons. I decided to add pulls right in front of where the urns would be, because this reminds me of Lara Croft a bit more. Like, I just like it. If you don't, you can obviously easily just delete the pulls. But the problem is that every time you want to place an urn, you're gonna have to delete the pool because it won't let you place it otherwise. But it's super easy, and then you can just add the pool back in. It just gives it a different feel, if you know what I mean. Especially if you like Tomb Raider, you're probably gonna like this. But let me just show you for a second what it looks like using actual urns. So here we quickly went over to my main save, and here, as you can see, the wall width is 4 tiles, so you can actually size up the shelf to make it bigger and cover up the blue part, which looks a lot better. But you know, you just have to see. If you want to do that, then you're just gonna have to make sure there's 2 tiles. Here I have the 2 parents that started it all, and also their child died drowning in the ocean, so I sized down the tombstone because it was a child. And also, if you want actual tombstones within the mausoleum, you can just delete the tiles and have ground instead, so then you will be able to place tombstones instead of having the cremated urns. And I made this mausoleum to be more run down and forgotten, so there's a lot of cracks and spiderwebs, so that's another idea. Anyways, back to the actual build. Here in this room, I'm kind of putting down I don't know what you call this, like a funeral service room. Yeah. Anyways, I put a vampire's bed in there. So a casket to look at, maybe if depending on how deep you get in your actual gameplay, you can pretend that there's a funeral happening. But I did this room purely for the sharing the build on the gallery. For me, I'm actually going to be making a kind of stairway room down to the basement where all my collection of my family collectibles is going to be, because for the achievement hunter there's a lot of the collections that you need to complete, so that's where I'm gonna be making like a family museum type of thing. So that's just an extra idea for you, because if you keep all your collections in the household that you play at, it gets so laggy so quick, especially depending on your computer. I also ended up putting curtains on the windows and walls so it looks more like it's decorated for a funeral. And here we have some clipping for the stone wall pieces, and I'm just using a bunch of rocks and plants to cover it up. I'm just sizing up and down a bunch of rocks and trying to make them fit so there's nothing floating mid-air, but there's also no furniture poking out. In the end, it also just looks better with these trees along the wall of the mausoleum. Also, it seemed weird that there was just a casket on the floor, so using the platforms I raised it up to look like it's actually standing on like a little podium, and this just looks more legit. From what I've seen from American graveyards, they're kinda bunch of graves sitting in a row in a field. They just, so I'm actually using a lot of ideas from graveyards from my home country, because they really like look after the graves and they make them all nice. They're usually in forested areas, so that's why I'm using a lot of trees around, and it also just looks better if you have some tree and greenery behind the grave. In this area I'm building a pet cemetery, and you really need the cats and dogs pack for cool looking graveyards, because they have more items. Like they have these frames that you often see, which you can also use for sim graves, not just pet graves, and the graves kind of just slot in there, and you can either put it on all the graves or just some, which looks more realistic in my opinion, that only some of them have the frames. You can leave items such as pet toys, or here I'm leaving a bowl of maybe favorite food. I like adding this particular grass because it just looks good and you size it down and slots in perfectly. You can either use one to limit the items in the actual build, or two if you want to make it perfect. And just not to get too repetitive, this is the whole finish. There's kind of sectioned off areas, and some have frames, some have just grass. Leave maybe even the food bowl or pet's favorite item. Now moving on to human graves. Another pack that you probably want is the romantic garden pack, because they just have some amazing statues that you can use in the graveyard. That pack is really amazing for building, so I would really suggest getting it if you don't have it. You can also use candles to make it seem like someone was just visiting the grave and put down candles. Now with the plants, you can either mismatch the colors or use a bigger bush and then a smaller the grass type of item that has the same color to make it look kind of like it's well taken care of and it's just smaller of the same kind of flowers. Or you can just use the terrain paint to paint in a dark soil color into the frame to make it look like there once were flowers there, but no one's taken care of them in a while, so it's just soil left. And here the sectioned off areas are, some look like maybe there was a richer family, so they have fancier arches around the graves, and some have just simple graves. Here I'm using another statue from the romantic garden pack, which is why I said it is just like a must if you want to have amazing looking graveyards. And there's other ones that you will see me use later on, just all of them make it look so much better. Make the whole section of the graveyard look more fancy, like it was, like I said, either a rich family or the matriarch. Also, by the graves you can place items that look like fresh flowers, like someone just dropped off flowers in a vase, either if the sim recently passed or if someone's just visiting the grave, like maybe it's their birthday or something like that. Rather than the flowers actually growing from the ground, it looks like someone dropped off a fresh pot of flowers. Here another idea is if you want kind of overgrown looking graves that haven't been taken care of, you can just size up the flowers and have them go out of the frame of the grave, Or here is like a black sheep graves that are just overgrown and looks like no one's been taking care of them in years. And here I am going to do a whole section of abandoned graves, or maybe they're just not exactly abandoned, but it's just like centuries old where all the relatives have passed, so like there's no one taking care of them anymore. Then I'm using these stone things from, I think it was Get Together pack. When I placed them into the fences, it looked like it once was a structure, maybe its own little mausoleum that kind of over time just collapsed. And you can also place individual rocks next to the graves so that they look like parts of maybe the tombstone even have crumbled. Here you can use even plants and put them kind of coming out of the tombstone. The only problem is that with these tombstones, yeah, they all look great, but when you put in actual sim tombstones, they all look the same and they look pretty like in a good condition, so it's obviously not gonna look as abandoned anymore. So in here, I'm showing you how you can actually make it look like someone's been recently buried, where the ground is slightly raised. Instead of placing an actual tombstone, I'm just placing a frame where there's flowers hanging. Those little piles of dirt were from Strangerville, I think. I'm placing down a frame instead of a tombstone because, as you may know, you actually don't place tombstones for a while after someone's been buried because the ground needs to settle first. So usually you would see either just a cross or some kind of marker before they place the tombstone. And yeah, you can just put a lot of kind of like memorabilia items, maybe items. As you see, I've placed also the pet items, kind of maybe the pet's favorite toy or the Sim's favorite item, and just like also picture frames that you can put in the graveyard just to make it a little bit more realistic. And on this area, I thought I would make a smaller mausoleum for supernatural Sims, but this is more of a typical mausoleum structure because they're usually just straight rectangular kind of buildings, pretty much using the same kind of walls and roof patterns but black. So here you also have to add in a second floor for the exterior trims to show up, otherwise you won't be able to place them, and then you have to delete the walls one by one so the trim doesn't delete too. But adding the smaller exterior trims has a function to hide the columns, because if you just use the roof you can see where the column starts and ends, which isn't really that good of a look. It doesn't look complete. So just remember to add in an extra floor and then delete it one by one, so you actually get to keep the trim, and you will see that it actually looks like a part of the either the structure or the roof. And then when you look down, the thicker exterior trim is still visible, so there's a difference in the architectural shapes. And for the thicker trims you definitely need high walls, otherwise you won't be able to place that, so just remember that. And inside there isn't that much space to do anything because it's just a small rectangular room, so I'm adding a platform at the end of the mausoleum just to give it a little bit more dimension, so you can either place another coffin there or your favorite vampires or supernaturals on there, or just any kind of supernatural vampy looking items. And then there's just some extra space on the walls for other urns. And just to finish everything off, I'm sizing down and raising up these lanterns. And also what I thought would be a fun idea for the abandoned parts or the very ancient parts of the graveyard, you can actually have a sim turn them off so it looks like that side of the graveyard no one's replaced the light bulbs and stuff. And I also put this wild birds tree, so you have like little birdies flying around. This can be an area, for example, for the two sims that started it all, and you can put actual sim pictures on that rock thing. And well, if you don't want random sims to come here and do just whatever they want, like what, you can set it as a residential lot and have maybe your favorite ghosts live there, or just have it set as a park or a generic lot if you want anyone to have access. But if you don't want Sims to steal your family heirlooms and collections, then definitely set it as a residential lot. But anyways, here I'm just showing you how to place actual tombstones, and you just have to kind of delete the pool and lift it up manually. They don't always align with the shelves, so you can just move it up and down, or you can use the red shelf, the CC item, and then just add in the pool again, or not if you don't want it. Sometimes it deletes the columns when you delete the pool, but just put it back. And that's all the ideas I currently have for the graves. I hope you found this helpful, or you're more inspired to make your sim graves look cooler, kind of. So if you want to find this, you can either search hashtag simmerrei on the Sims 4 gallery, or just find Raniella818 and the item name Family Graveyard. So I hope you found this helpful and your Sims are gonna have a nicer afterlife now, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!